All right, let's talk about the state of the Russia-Ukraine war as we see it in late 2025. Now, we're not here to predict the future, not at all. What we're going to do is dig into the incredible clash of military strategies that's playing out on the battlefield right now. So let's get right into it.
Okay, but before we go any further, there's something really important you need to know. Every single number you're about to see, it's an expert estimate. You've probably heard the term fog of war, and believe me, it is absolutely real. Getting exact, verifiable numbers in the middle of a conflict like this is, well, it's pretty much impossible. So what we're looking at here is the best, clearest picture available in a situation that's constantly changing.
And that brings us right to the heart of it, the core theme of this entire conflict. I mean, when you boil it all down for 2025, this war is a massive showdown between two completely different ways of fighting. On one side, you have Russia, betting everything on industrial mass. We're talking more people, more shells, more old tanks, just sheer numbers. And on the other side, you've got Ukraine, forced to rely on asymmetric precision, on technology. It really is the classic age-old battle, quantity versus quality.
So where do we start? Well, you always have to start with the people fighting it. This is the human front, and it's a real battle of scale versus skill.
I mean, just look at the raw numbers here. Russia's population pool is just enormous, more than 3 times the size of Ukraine's. And in a long, grinding war of attrition, that is a huge strategic advantage. It's all about who can replace their losses. But, and this is a big but, population size is only one piece of the puzzle.
See, here's where it gets interesting. While Russia absolutely has the numbers, the quality of their troops is, well, it's all over the map. You've got your elite professional soldiers, sure, but you also have hastily mobilized civilians and even units made up of convicts. Ukraine, on the other hand, has a force that is, by and large, incredibly experienced at this point. They're highly motivated, and they've become masters at using the strange mix of old Soviet gear and cutting-edge NATO equipment.
So, what does this mean? It means both sides are facing huge manpower challenges. For Russia, it's this constant, slow burn, creeping mobilization. They're always trying to plug the gaps from just staggering losses. Ukraine's problem is different. They're grappling with the hard math of a smaller population. For them, it's a massive strategic challenge just to keep the front lines fully manned.
Okay, let's shift gears now to the heart of the land war, the war of iron. This is where the brutal, grinding reality of this conflict really hits home. It's a place where attrition is king. Just take a second and look at that number. 15,000 plus. That's the estimated number of Russian armored vehicles lost. That one single number is so huge, it tells you almost everything you need to know about Russia's ground strategy today. It's a number that has forced them to completely change how they fight.
And here's exactly how they've changed. Because of those insane losses, Russia has gone all in on mass over-modernization. They just can't crank out their modern T-90 tanks fast enough to keep up. So what do? They're literally pulling thousands of ancient T-62s and even T-55s, tanks from the 1950s, out of deep storage. Ukraine is playing a totally different game, relying on smaller numbers of high-quality Western systems mixed in with their own older Soviet gear.
But that creates a massive problem for Ukraine, a problem that military folks call a logistical zoo. And seriously, just imagine this for a second. You're a Ukrainian mechanic near the front. On the same day, you have to fix an American Abrams tank, a German Leopard, and a British Challenger. Every single one needs different parts, different tools, different ammo. It's a maintenance nightmare, plain and simple. And all of this brings us to what is arguably the single most critical factor on the entire battlefield today. Just look at this firepower gap. On any given day, Russia can fire 5, sometimes even 10 times more artillery shells than Ukraine can. That's not just an advantage, that is overwhelming dominance in raw firepower. It completely shapes what's possible on the ground.
So what does that mean for Ukraine?
Well, it leads to a constant state of what they call shell hunger. They simply don't have enough. So they have to make every single shot count. They can't just blast an entire area. Instead, they have to compensate. They use super precise munitions like HIMARS to take out high-value targets, and they've become absolute masters of using swarms of cheap FPV drones to make up for that lack of big, explosive firepower.
All right, let's pivot now and look up at the skies and out to the seas. Because if the land war is all about grinding attrition, these are the areas where Ukraine's asymmetrical approach has delivered some of its most shocking and, frankly, stunning results.
And this right here is one of the biggest surprises of the entire war. I mean, on paper, Russia has one of the largest air forces on the planet. They should own the skies over Ukraine. But they don't. They've completely failed to achieve what's called air supremacy. And that failure forces them to launch most of their attacks, missiles, glide bombs, from way back inside the safety of Russian airspace. They're just too afraid to fly deep into Ukraine.
So why? How has this massive air force been largely neutralized? The answer is Ukraine's air defense shield. They have built this incredibly dense, layered network. It's this brilliant, clever mix of their old Soviet systems, like the S-300, combined with some of the best Western tech out there, like the Patriot and Iris-T systems. And now, with F-16s finally arriving, they're getting an even better ability to go out and actively hunt down these threats.
Okay, if you thought the story in the air was surprising, what's happened in the Black Sea is just astonishing. It's maybe the best example of this whole asymmetric battle. You have Russia's Black Sea Fleet, a powerful modern naval force, and it has been, for all intents and purposes, defeated. Defeated by a country that has, well, no real navy to speak of.
I mean, just listen to this list of victories. Using a combination of ingenious sea drones and long-range missiles from the West, Ukraine managed to sink the fleet's flagship, the Moskva. They blew up the fleet headquarters. They've sunk multiple landing ships and even a submarine. They've forced the entire Russian fleet to retreat so far east that they were able to reopen the critical Black Sea grain corridor. It is a textbook masterclass in asymmetric warfare.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. Let's do a quick summary of the key contrasts that really define this war in 2025.
This really lays it all out pretty clearly. When you look at tanks, it's Russia's sheer numbers against Ukraine's higher quality, and that logistical zoo we talked about. With artillery shells, the key takeaway is that massive 5 to 10 to 1 advantage for Russia. But then you get to naval power, and the whole thing is flipped on its head. Total asymmetric dominance for Ukraine. So what's the bottom line? Russia's biggest advantage is its ability to just grind things out with industrial-scale attrition. Ukraine's edge comes from its clever asymmetric tactics and the high-end Western tech it's been given. And in the end, it really all boils down to this one idea. This is the central story of the war in late 2025. It's a brutal, real-world test of quantity versus quality. And the thing that might just decide it all? Logistics. The simple, unglamorous ability of each side to supply its forces on the front line. That might be the single most decisive factor. And so that leaves us with one final massive question. Because as we watch all this unfold, what we're really seeing is a live experiment. A test of two completely different ways of waging war. So the question is, what will this conflict ultimately prove as more decisive in a modern war? Overwhelming industrial might or brilliant tactical innovation?